In this example from the lunar infrastructure, we talk about demonstrating things. Key difference in those, as an example, that you'll see in our glossary. If we're demonstrating something, we're just doing the initial capability, hoping that our partners, industry, international, et cetera, will take the next steps in helping to build out a robust economy, for example. If it says develop, it means that we're doing the full capability to meet our objectives. Operations had a suite of 11 goals. This one is an example of how we're doing a build-up approach in other environments to prepare for the Mars missions. And then science had something along the lines of 17 goals, I believe. Some were spread throughout the disciplines, and some were basically looking at how we go about collecting the science, or the unknown unknowns. So you're going to see all 50 of those objectives. Now, the first step, as I mentioned, is to recognize, after we've developed these objectives and we reach consensus on them, including with your input, is we have to face the reality that we're not starting with a clean sheet of paper. We actually do have current efforts that are ongoing. Some have been going on for quite some time. Some are just getting started, and some have just started recently. So what we have to do is we have to build this bridge between the objectives and the current efforts. And as we build that bridge, it would be perfect if we could get perfect alignment on either side of this. But the reality is there's probably going to be disconnects. And some of those disconnects will fall in the category of an objective that is not being met by any current effort. In that case, we need to start something. Another kind of disconnect will be a current effort that is not tied to any objective. If that's the case, we have to ask ourselves, is that an effort we shouldn't be doing? Or is that effort really for something else that's beyond? We should be doing it, but it's not for this program. Or are we missing an objective? And that's part of this washing process that we're doing this summer, in part with help from you. There's another kind of disconnect that we could expect where you've got multiple current efforts that are attacking a single objective. And in that case, there could be manifold reasons for that disconnect. One, it could be that there are things that we're not supposed to be doing as it relates to the Moon to Mars, or it could be that we're missing objectives, one or more, or it could be that maybe a subset of that is maybe what the objective that we're missing is that we're purposefully taking redundant approaches for diversity of thought so that we'll have risk reduction on that particular objective because all of the technology is such low technology readiness level. But we're going to be conducting that gap analysis on the federated board to look at bridging that gap between the objectives and the current efforts. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But first, let me introduce Jim, who's going to talk about what the architecture looks like today as we advertise things today and the planning going forward.
Thanks, Spuds. Appreciate the introduction, Pam and Spuds. So let's first talk about how we architect today. And I'd like to share with you on this chart the process we use that starts with a strategic analysis cycle that you see on the left of the chart. That cycle has a number of inputs to it, one of which is first our overall strategy and budget that we align the architecture to. We look at the capabilities and technologies that are available both inside and outside the agency. We understand what our current programs can do, what their lift capacity is, what their total crew is, what their return capability is. And then we look at where we're going and what utilization we need to model our architecture after. And that cycle then, strategic analysis cycle, works along really 5 elements. First, it balances all that in the entire Moon to Mars campaign. It looks at specific parts of that campaign and how the architecture is developed around the concept of operations or mission objectives. We look at specific formulation of elements of all of the goals that are input. What do we need to do in the formation of an element such as the surface habitat or the transhab? We do a lot of modeling and simulation to play the objectives and requirements against the elements. And in some cases, we actually even do some prototyping or some human-in-the-loop testing to validate the objectives or give further input for future strategic analysis cycles. When we complete that cycle, we have a number of outputs. We have inputs to our budget process, which help us lay out our plan in our 5-year budget horizon. We understand where we have gaps in capabilities so we can fill those gaps. We look at changes we need to make in existing programs that might limit what we want to do with our entire architecture. We also then look for new programs that we have to start to fulfill those objectives, or new partnerships with our international partners that we need to start to fulfill the objectives. And all of that then goes into our implementing organizations to go actually execute. So moving on from our strategic analysis cycle plan, we really have 4 areas of focus. The first for us is what our deputy administrator has asked us to really focus on as we look at our architecture development, and that's with an emphasis on science. Everything within all of our elements connects to the why we are going. Our architectures enable the science. For instance, in situ resource utilization. What do we need to take and where do we need to go to maximize, to get ISRU science back, and then also use ISRU as a tool on the surface to do further exploration and science gathering.